Welcome back to part 2 of how to prevent HR burnout. So in the first video, I talked about what is creating your experience moment to moment to moment. Because if we don't have that understanding as the foundation, then we're going to continue to feel like we are powerless, that we are victims of circumstance. And this is where part 2 comes in. So once we can understand the human psyche, once we can understand that everything that you experience, moment to moment to moment, no exception, is an internally generated response based on the perceptual map and model that you carry around inside your neurophysiology, then that leads us into step 2. And step 2 is self-awareness and consciousness. And it is my absolute belief, having held 10,000 one-to-one sessions with people, that in order for us to create real, lasting change and transformation, in order for us to create a whole new paradigm in HR, we have to raise our levels of consciousness. Because how we experience life in any given moment is based on our current level of thinking. So if we consider, well, what is creating my reality? I understand that it's internally generated, but in this moment, why do I think and feel the way that I do? And that is about conditioning. So if we consider the unconscious mind, and what we absolutely know to be true is that we are operating from the level of the unconscious mind around about 95 to 98% of the time. That means that if you are not fully present, then the unconscious mind is running the show. So thinking about this in the context of burnout, it is my absolute assertion to you that if you're experiencing burnout, you are not showing up in the present moment. And the reason for that is that if we're in burnout, we are in the survival response. We are operating from the level of survival. And our brain has gone into high range beta. High range beta is akin to chaos. And so it becomes really hard to focus, to concentrate, to absorb information, because we're literally in survival mode. It's like somebody's hit the emergency button and yet we're still in a burning building. And so we cannot show up as our true empowered self, fully present, if we are in survival mode. But these conditioned responses, so conditioning thoughts, patterns of thought, habitual thoughts, beliefs, emotional responses, behaviours, all of that is running the show. Now, if we don't have the level of self-awareness, if we don't have the level of consciousness of where we've fallen into these habitual conditioned responses, then they are what is running the show. And what I absolutely know to be true from having worked with so many people is that when people are able to raise their levels of self-awareness and they're able to see these habitual thought patterns, they're able to see the way that they respond to certain situations, well, that immediately empowers them. Because what they start to learn is that these responses, they're not personal. They are just habitual, conditioned responses. And I remember hearing something one day where somebody had said, if you're not consciously creating it, you are unconsciously accepting it. If you're not consciously creating it, you are unconsciously accepting it. And that really struck me because it's so true. If we are not creating how we want to experience life, then unfortunately we are accepting these conditioned responses. But when we can start to see, okay, I'm just in this habitual thought pattern, and it's not actually telling me anything about reality. It's not a new thought. It's just a thought that I'm probably not even thinking. It's like a broken record in the background. And we can start to see those thoughts for what they are. Well, then we can start to operate from a very different space. But we have to be aware of these thoughts, these patterns. It's one of the reasons when I run my signature program, HR Alchemy, I get people to complete a pre-assessment to really start to see these patterns for what they are. And yes, it can be really uncomfortable because it's like having a really good look in the mirror and going, okay, there's that part of me that I really just don't really want to look at. But when we can see it and we can bring it out into the light, well, then we are in an empowered place to be able to create change. And the more that we can raise our levels of consciousness, I kind of like to think of consciousness as being in an aeroplane. And that way that we're able to look down and we can see the landscape. And it's kind of like that. It's like looking down at the landscape of your life, looking down and seeing, okay, I can see where that reaction might have come from. I can see what's going on there. I can see why I've maybe been scared to be vulnerable. I can see why perhaps I always get quite defensive. I can see why I've been playing small. I can see why I am a people pleaser, something which a lot of HR professionals associate with themselves. But when we can see it and we can understand it and we can recognize, do you know what? This isn't necessarily who I am. These are just conditioned responses, because who you are is the consciousness that's able to observe all of that. And when we can see that, when we can realize that, when we can continue to operate from that space that lets us know that these are just habitual conditioned responses, well, then our levels of consciousness rise. And there is no limit to the level of consciousness, because consciousness doesn't have a limit. And again, the space that we're able to show up in is one of clarity. It's one of calm. It's one of balance. It's one of emotional intelligence. It's one of emotional regulation. It's all the qualities that we want to experience in what we might consider a high performance state. So raising those levels of self-awareness and consciousness is the catalyst to the change. And so when we can start to transform these, well then we're in a much stronger position to not get back to that old space of burnout again. So this is step 2. Step 3, nervous system regulation. I'll see you on the next video.